Okay, and hello, and welcome back to another video. This one is about wounds. New system in Monster Hunter Wilds. Kind of like the evolution out of tenderizing from Monster Hunter Iceborne. I would say the reception, though, to tenderizing was generally negative, whereas the reception to wounds has been generally positive. It is a new mechanic, though, and it's a little confusing exactly how it works. So I'm going to split this video up a little bit. First part is going to be mostly spoiler-free. There might be some little bits of equipment you see that might be a tiny spoiler just because I want to show elemental damage in the calculations for wounds. But otherwise, mostly spoiler-free. And then the second part will be a little bit more spoilers. It's going to get into a armor skill that I did a lot of testing on. You might see some equipment you haven't seen before. So just so you know, I will let you know before we get into that. So, wounds. What are they and how do they work? We're going to do all this within the context of this training dummy. The one thing that I want to point out that makes the training dummy, though, different from a monster is when you wound a monster and you destroy that wound, it takes a very long time to come back, if it'll ever come back at all over the course of a fight. So, it works quite a bit different. It may seem great here, but in an actual fight, if you're only hitting one spot of the monster over and over again, like you're a hammer or a hunting horn user and you are only hitting the head, you're not going to get a lot of use out of wounds. If you're using another type of weapon, switch axe, charge blade, dual blades, something where you may be hitting lots of different parts of the body, it will be more useful. So what are wounds and how do they work? There are two stages. The first stage is opening up a fresh wound. On this training dummy, once you do a little over 200 damage, a fresh wound will be opened. We did hit that side there, so the calculation might be slightly off. There we go. There is our fresh wound. So fresh wounds are very interesting. They're not just cosmetic. There is an actual benefit to them. So damage-wise, it's the same if you do a normal attack. However, if you do a focus strike, Vital Stab doesn't do anything there, but if you use it on a fresh wound, it's actually a different attack entirely. If we deal another 200 damage, though, to a fresh wound, it becomes a deep wound. Now, deep wounds are, of course, something people become familiar with very quickly. You use your focus strike on that, and you're able to do a special attack. Big difference, though, is like I've been saying, on a normal monster, once they've been scarred, this scar will stay there for a very long time if it ever goes away at all. So you will then need to move on to another part of the monster in order to continue to take advantage of those wounding mechanics. So just to show that it is damage and not just number of hits, we're going to switch our weapon. We're going to use something slightly stronger. We'll use, actually, we'll go one up on this one. This is 190 raw. This is white sharpness. Okay, so we're over 200 damage. Our next hit should be the one to open up the fresh wound. There it is. And then, of course, you know, we're dealing even more damage now, so that other hit did a lot of damage and it got us the deep wound very quickly. And then we'll just show it with element on there as well. So you can see the training dummy, it takes, it's like 30 seconds or so for these wounds to fall off. Okay, next one might do it. Yep, next one did it. Okay, and there's our open wound, deep wound. And then we go there. So that's essentially how wounds work. Normal damage, crit damage, elemental damage. They all work together towards building up that wound. Main thing to take away from this video, if you didn't know anything about wounds before, is those fresh wounds can be exploited by other weapons. Let me show one other one, only because I think a lot of people think it's kind of bad, but actually it's kind of neat. So Gunlance. Gunlance gets a lot of hate. People think it's only good for shelling, and I agree. The shelling is insanely good here. No arguments. our melee isn't doing a lot of damage, but if you have a wound, normally Drake Auger doesn't really do anything. But if you have a fresh wound, it actually does pretty good damage. I mean, you get, I don't know. I mean, that's really not that bad. Was that 500 damage? Look how much work we have to do to equal one well-timed Drake Auger. So, just something to keep in mind. It is quite a bit harder on monsters to see the fresh wounds as they are opening up. But it's the sort of thing that over time you'll kind of get used for the rhythm and tempo to see them opening up. Okay, so now we're going to get into the armor skill. So, spoiler free. Head on out. Spoilers in. Come on it. Okay, so we, and by we, I mean I, had to do a little addendum. This is so much work. So just to elaborate on the exact testing that I've done with Flayer, I'm just going to be squeezing this in the middle. This is after editing everything else. I want to be clear exactly how Flayer interacts with the number of hits to wound, and I want to show my methodology. So without any Flayer skill, using this current setup, which we do want to make sure is activated. Let's activate our frenzy first. Okay, so this is frenzy activated, everything's ready to go. This is the way we're going to be in our normal state the vast majority of the time. With this setup, with 0 Flayer, let us see how many hits it should take to cause a deep wound on this training dummy. It should be between 12 and 13. Okay, 12, exactly as we thought. Now, we are going to switch to Flayer level 5. It will not be a dramatic difference. I would expect, in general, 11 hits if we are lucky, because it may be less. That was 10 hits. Okay, that was better than average. So, Flayer does help reduce the amount of hits necessary to cause a wound. When I did my testing, and I'll show you my raw data in a moment, these are the results I got. It's a little weird. There is a gradual downward trend. For some reason, maybe I got very lucky in the trials that I ran. 3 is lower than everything else. Could be just luck. Could be a bug. I'm tired of testing this skill. But suffice it to say, Flayer does help get you down to a deep wound. That should say hits to deep wound, not deep wound to hits. That doesn't make any sense. Whatever. Here is the data. You can see those are the exact trials I ran. I did 12 of each level. I recorded all of them. Let me show you the settings for the dummy just so you can see it. You can see my stuff here as well. Should be able to do something similar. Okay, so max, hard, hide setting. And then, you want to have some decent damage. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there all day hitting it. Okay. Next is the really weird thing. We are at, let's go. It's going to pull out a good great sword. I'm going to use this great sword. We're going to switch off the Blongo mail. It's okay. We don't need it. Going to put our Flayer on here. We'll switch this to Flayer. We're going to turn everything on. We're going to make the dummy as weak as possible. We really don't need any of these skills with it being this weak. So Flayer makes it easier to make wounds. Flayer can also trigger randomly when you create a fresh wound and deal damage. It is random. So I'll tell you now, spoilers, it's like a 1 in 5 chance. There it is, right there, 280. So let me show you the values for the damage numbers for when you create a wound. Okay. Levels 1 through 5. Even scaling upward. Actually, should I do it the other way? Even scaling upward, right? So level 1 is 140 damage, level 2 is 160 damage, level 3 is 190, level 4 is 230, level 5 is 280. That is increasing returns to scale. Each level of Flayer that you put on gives you increasing damage. When it procs, when you create a fresh wound. Not only that, it needs to be like a big hit. If you're using too weak of a weapon, for some reason, it procs very rarely. With Greatsword, it procs incredibly consistently. With weaker weapons, it feels like it doesn't proc as consistently. Keep that in mind. Maybe in another week or two, we'll do a follow-up once we know exactly why some weaker weapons proc it and others don't. That's not the interesting thing. The interesting thing, and the reason why people are out there saying the skill is bugged, is because when you check the levels versus the proc rate doing this exact test that I'm doing, these are the results you get. Huh? So wait, I'm telling you that in terms of making wounds, the data I have shows level 5 and level 3 being better at making wounds. But the proc rate for the proc damage is better on levels 2 and 4. Huh? What? I guess when you look at it that way, 4 does seem better than 5. It's 1 less point. It procs more often. Right? Nope, never mind. 4 still takes more hits to wound than 5 does. But then 3 procs less often. And 3 does less damage. 5 still procs a relatively often amount, but not as much as 4 and 2. But 4 and 2 do less damage. But then 4 and 2... It's a mess. It is a hot mess. Here's what I will say. The damage that you're getting is fairly incidental anyways. What you really want are the most wounds to take advantage of. Level 3 looks good. Level 1 is better than nothing. I think no matter what conclusion we come to, there is clearly something wrong with this skill. And it will likely need to be fixed. So I'm going to keep going through this video after this segment as if the skill has been fixed. All level 2 Flayer activating more often does is slightly normalize the damage up to level 5. It doesn't change the fact that level 3 and level 5 appear to have the best benefit to creating wounds. And it also doesn't change the fact that the damage per activation does increase depending on the level. Are you confused? So am I a little bit. I understand what they were trying to do with the skill. Make it easier to make wounds and randomly give you extra damage when you make a wound. The way it is currently implemented right now, based in the training room right now, it's bizarre. And when we look at the armor skill, you know, it is no help. It's no help at all. And it doesn't seem correct. So take that for what you will. I will briefly show some of my data for the trials for determining the proc rate. Let me see if I have it here. Where are you? I'm going to make it the size of ants. I can't even zoom out enough for all that. Here, I'm just going to throw it right in the OBS for you. This is what we're dealing with. These are all the data points I did. I just ran around hitting that training pole of my greatsword. All right, enjoy the rest of the video. Issue is if you start putting in more than 1 point, of course, there's only so many spots in the monsters that you can wound and get focus strikes out of. So I'm going to get a little bit into the weapons, and I'm going to talk about Flayer and its relationship to each one of those in terms of it's a weapon you're using, whether or not I think it's worth bringing Flayer on. So we'll start with talking about Greatsword. Focus Strike on Greatsword, I think, is pretty good. Does decent damage, gets you into a true charge slash, and most importantly, it moves you down the monster, meaning you're now at a new spot, and then you can go ahead and attack that spot and potentially open up a new wound. Nice part about Flayer, the whole concept of Flayer is it's helping you open up these fresh wounds in spots that you may not otherwise have opened them up yet. So I think it's okay on Greatsword. I'd put it about like maybe the middle of the pack. Longsword, of course, loves wounds. It's got one of the best focus strikes for it. You get yourself a level of spirit gauge. Then when you're spending your spirit gauge, you're doing a Helmbreaker and you can move around a little bit, targeting different spots with Helmbreaker. Then you do your finisher attack. You're hitting a large areas of the monster. You're going to be opening up a lot of wounds. So in general, if you're going to be using a weapon that is hitting large areas of the monster, opening up lots of wounds, you're going to be getting the most value out of Flayer. Sword and Shield, I would probably rank below Greatsword in terms of usability. It is, of course, very mobile. The radial slashes and stuff like that are great at hitting various parts of the monster. I think the issue is the focus strike isn't necessarily moving you large areas around the monster. You're mostly probably going to be sticking towards the head or the arms. Your reach is also somewhat limited. You know, it's not super easy to be hitting like wings or tails and things like that. So I think below Greatsword is probably where it belongs. Dual Blades, I think, could really benefit a lot. The biggest issue is, of course, it's going to be competing with other armor skills. I would personally way rather have more points in latent power than in Flayer. I'd love to have maybe 1 point on that, but probably not more than that. You know, its Focus Strike does move it all around the monster, so you're going to be getting lots of repositioning. You're going to be lots of opportunities to be hitting other spots. Just right now with the armor we have, though, I just don't know if it can be that good. Hammer and Hunting Horn, big issue is they're on the head almost the whole time. You're going to get that one wound on the head super fast, and then outside of that, you're probably not going to use it much. So I don't think I would even run 1 point of Flayer here, unless you only played Hammer, you only soloed, and you were trying to get more wounds on more parts of the monster to get parts. That's about it. Lance does have good reach. Lance does have a focus strike that moves it around. I think the one issue is its focus strike to me feels somewhat weak. Yeah, it could be nice to get some extra parts. Yeah, it could be nice to open up some extra wounds in other parts of the body, but I don't think the damage that you get out of it is particularly great. Gunlance, I do like the focus strike. The issue is because you're not directly hitting the monster when you're shelling them, you're not going to be really getting that full benefit of Flayer. Its normal attacks are relatively weak, and while they will get boosted by Gunlance, from Flayer to open up more wounds, for the most part, you're going to be shelling. It would be a very niche skill if you could fit it. Maybe 1 point would be okay, just because if maybe you were hitting with the auger and you're hitting other areas, helping to open up other wounds, that could work. But other than 1 point, I wouldn't use it at all. There's no need. You just want to keep stacking your raw there. Switch axe, I think Flayer is great. This could definitely be along the same lines of longsword. I could see somebody going all the way up to Flayer 5. It has, axe chops that hit a wide area. Its full release slash hits a wide area. Many of its attacks are just going around all over the place. And then not only that, its focus strike, whether you're in axe mode or in sword mode, both are very good. They give you buffs. They get you into full release slash in case you're in the sword mode. It could be really good. I could definitely see somebody wanting to put more points there, especially because Switch Axe, it likes affinity, but it doesn't need affinity as badly because the Phials don't crit. So you don't have to worry about that aspect. You're still getting damage just from your raw either way. Charge Blade, if you're staying in Savage Axe mode, I don't see why you wouldn't run 1 point. If you are doing an SAED playstyle, obviously don't use it all. It's not going to help you. Those Phials aren't going to trigger Flayer, so don't bother. But if you find yourself constantly in Savage Axe, I think it could be okay. Of course, the Focus Strike puts you back into Savage Axe. Savage Axe itself has a lot of range around it. You're going to be hitting a lot of different parts of the monster, opening up more wounds, again, giving you more chances to get extra damage from the Flare damage bonus. Insect Glaive, same thing. You're moving around a lot. The charged attack on the Insect Glaive attacks a wide area. When you get those wounds open, that gets you triple up back, which then allows you to, again, use the wide area attack, which then gets you more wounds, and it lets you cycle it more and more often. So I could definitely see Insect Glaive being in the same tier as Switch Axe or Longsword, considering to use up to Flare level 5. Light Bowgun, Heavy Bowgun, don't know anything about it. Don't ask me. Bow is probably ranked about the same as Dual Blades. It's the same thing where it's like you would probably really like to have Flare 5, but Bow, even more than Dual Blades, probably wants as many stamina skills as it can get. I just don't think there's room. Maybe 1 point? 1 point's probably the best that you can do. If you're a god at managing your stamina and you want to try and go for 5 points, I would love to see it. I just don't think you can fit it. Okay, that is a lot to talk about wounds. I think I covered everything. To recap, took 200 damage to open up a fresh wound, another 200 damage to open up a deep wound. It takes the damage combined before you destroy the deep wound from my testing. Weapons get special attacks when you're attacking fresh wounds with their focus strikes. I haven't tested all of them, but they all at the very least deal more damage. Some of these attacks are actually pretty good, and it's worth keeping an eye out on the monster to see when an opportunity is to use them, especially for something like Sword and Shield. That attack is really cool. I like that. Flare itself is an okay 1 point skill if you can fit it, and a very niche situational 5 point skill on things like Switch Axe, Longsword, Insect Glaive, and Dual Blades and Bow if we ever get like 1 million free armor skills. If you are using Flare, you have to be using a weapon and fighting a monster where you're comfortable attacking many different parts. So ideally, you're fighting a monster that has a very high elemental ratio that will probably benefit more from attacking weaker raw parts, but then have higher elemental damage that will then combine with Flare to open up wounds that you can then deal more additional damage to the monster. Or at the end of the day, if you just want to run Flare 5 because you want to make sure you're opening up every wound on a monster possible so everybody in your group can be getting additional rewards, that is also completely acceptable as well. Okay, I am positive I missed something. There will likely be a follow-up to wounds in the future, I'm sure. At the very least, in another couple days, we're going to be returning back to the elemental ratio video I did. We have more information from Kiriniko, more data mine information there that I want to get into. I just wanted to get my own information, my own research, my own take on Flayer out there for now. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.